What's the classic SIG pistol hardly anyone knows about? Well, today we're going to show you, so buckle up. Hi everybody, welcome back to LocaCarnivore. Glad you could join us. Today we're going to take a look at the classic SIG pistol hardly anybody knows about, the Sig P239. It's a dandy little gun. Unfortunately, it's kind of been forgotten for a lot of reasons we're going to go into, but it's still a pretty good little gun. We're going to show you in depth all about it. I'm going to take you out to the range so you can see how it runs out the range, and I think you're going to enjoy it. So stay with us throughout the entire video. The Sig P239 has been around for quite a while. It was in production for roughly 22 years, from 1996 to 2018, which is a pretty good run. Trouble is, this gun was brought out at a time when the market was changing and had already changed. It's kind of like too little too late for SIG, in my opinion, and that's why it sort of got shoved off into a corner, and nobody really paid much attention to it, frankly. I mean, it was bought up relatively for, large federal law enforcement institutions, relatively small numbers, but it was issued for a time to customs agents, U.S. Border and Customs agents, as well as the Naval Criminal Investigative Service, NCIS. I don't know if Mark Harmon ever carried one. Go into one of you NCIS gurus, go find out if he carried one of these and put it down in the comments for me. I'd love to know about it. I just never really watched the show much, but they carried this gun. Other than that, it didn't get a lot of market share, frankly, and we're going to show you why in a few minutes here. And while you're at it, don't forget to give us a big like on the video and subscribe. We want you on the LocaCarnivore team, and don't forget to ring that notification bell so you get notified every time we come out with a new video. Also, while you're at it, we'd appreciate some support. Go down to our Patreon, the link's in the description, as well as our website, LocaCarnivore.com, in the description. You can go to our little store off of the website, get some merchandise. I think you'll really like it. Appreciate your support. Well, here's the Sig P239. And it's pretty conventional. It follows the same pattern as the other Sig double action, single action, hammer fired pistols, starting with the 220, the 220. That was either originally a 9mm and 45 ACP. They also make a 10mm in that. And then the famous 226 and the 228 and the 229, all those different guns. Now, what makes the 239 different, amongst many things, is it's a single stack, 8 rounds, and it has a little finger support for your little finger. All the guns have been safety checked, of course, before we get started on this. And it has the standard SIG controls that you're probably used to. You've got the takedown lever, and this is the decocker, and then here's your slide release. So if you were to cock the hammer on this thing, you can decock it like that. Very safe, very good system. It's time proven. Been used on, like I said, a lot of different SIG guns. And then this is the slide release. So there, catches the slide open on an empty, and then you just drop the slide down, and then you decock your weapon. And then it's ready to go in the double action. The double action pole is relatively, it's not that heavy. It's a lot lighter than, say, a Beretta 92, and way lighter than any of the Walthers, like the PP or the PPK or the P38. And it's also a lighter, smoother pole than the old Smith & Wesson hammer guns, like starting with the Model 39, 59, etc. And so you pull through, and then once it cycles, you're left with a single action pole. So you do have to transition from that double action pole, so then it'll cycle, and then you've got the single action. This reset's pretty short. They make a short reset trigger for this. I don't know if this gun has it. I bought it used, of course, since they're not making them anymore. They quit in 2018. But there's a little bit of uptake, and then it's a very crisp release. There's a little bit of trigger movement. It's not that exactly crisp, release you get out of a really well-tuned 1911 or something like that. But for this type of action, it's quite usable, quite serviceable. And like I said, you just have to get used to pulling through that double action pull. And this, even though it's related to the 220, the 220, and the 226, and those, etc., it is a different frame because it's a single stack pistol. It's a single stack pistol, so it's completely different. So it's completely, the frame itself, the trigger guard you can see is a different profile than any of the other Sig hammer guns, and it still has plenty of room to get a gloved finger in there. And what I like is that at the bottom of the double action pull, you're not going to get, and I've shot this with gloves on to test it, unlike a revolver, you generally don't get your finger caught up, the glove material doesn't get bunched up and caught in the trigger. And since it goes to single action afterwards anyways, it's really not an issue. So it's a really good design. It's got these plastic wraparound type grips, very Sig philosophy. Standard magazine release, Browning style magazine release. The one thing I don't like about these grips, they're kind of slippery. Well, they are quite slick actually. And I think Sig went that way because it's a gun they designed for concealment. This gun was intended to be a gun that would be used by undercover officers or as an off-duty piece. So if, let's say, your issue gun, your duty gun, when in uniform was like a 226, this would be your off-duty gun. So it'd be the same type of manual of arms, same operations, you wouldn't have to relearn anything, but it would be thinner and lighter and smaller and more compact to carry than a 226. So this gun, and the sights are pretty nice on this, hopefully you can see that there. It's got the Sig bar right in line with the rear notch, and then it's got a dot in the front. So these are very intuitive to use. They line up very, very easily and really easy to shoot, very easy. They're not a tritium, so you can't see them in low light per se. That's the only drawback. I suppose you could probably get some tritium sights being a Sig. There should be good stuff out there for it. And then, of course, unlike a Glock, it takes down very easily and safely. You don't have to pull the trigger first or anything like that. It takes, so if you're familiar with a Sig or a Beretta, it takes down just like that. I'm not going to take the gun apart for you, but it's very simple, very straightforward. You just lock the slide to the rear, slide this lever down 90 degrees, and then everything just comes off. And you got barrel, recoil spring captured, and slide, and that's it. You can go to town. So let's talk about why this gun didn't achieve popularity, you would think. Well, 1996, when this was introduced, was a really difficult time to introduce a single stack gun. The industry was in pretty much a headlong race into double stacks with the Wonder 9s back in the 80s and then even into the 90s. And so this gun, even though it's smaller than a 226, it's narrower in the grip, but the slide's still quite wide. It's got a very wide slide on it. There we go. It's got a very wide slide, and there's not much Sig could have done with that based on the way they do their lockup, because they have the classic, what's called the Sig lockup, instead of having grooves and things cut into the slide like Browning did. They just lock up. The barrel has a flange and it just locks up into the ejection port. So that's how it locks up. So that kind of limits you on the amount of room you have as an engineer, as a designer, to play with the width of the slide. So by modern standards, especially when you go to like the the micros, like the Hellcat and the 365 from Sig and everything. By the way, I'm not a big fan. I will tell you right now, I am not a big fan of polymer Sig striker guns. And I'm not going to go into that in any great detail, but you know all the issues that go with some of those guns. I'm going to get hate mail, and you fanboys, well, that's fine. But this is the way Sig should have stayed. These guns are bomb-proof. They're stone cold reliable, and they're very well made. I think this one is actually... This one was made in the U.S. This was made in New Hampshire, Exeter, New Hampshire, and some of them are made in Germany, but this is made in the U.S. And even as a U.S. production gun, I found the quality on it absolutely impeccable. Everything works on it great. But here's the rub: the single stack magazine. Now, I'm a big fan actually of single stacks. I have double stacks, but they single stacks make for a narrow grip, so that make narrower grip, so you can really get your hand on the thing. and it's not big chubby thing like a double stack. However, in the marketplace, everybody was going to double stacks, and I'm going to compare it for you real quick. Put the mag back in. Getting mags for these is really tough because they've been discontinued, and I believe it's the 225 magazine. I've got several of those, and they do work on this in this gun. They just don't have the little finger shoe, so it's a little awkward to grip it. Unfortunately, I don't have a magazine to throw in here and show you, but just think about not having this little finger notch down here for your little pinky, and your pinky tends to kind of run under just a little bit. So if you've got really big meaty paws instead of hands, you might find the gun a little challenging, especially with that other magazine in there. All right, single-handed rapid fire. She tends to walk around a little bit in your hand, so that instead of being right on the fingertip on single action, you're right on the almost on the knuckle. So it tends to torque a little bit. Part of that's the gloves; they're not very sticky, and then these grips are a little slick. You know, part of that's the gloves, and then the grips are they're a little slick, but it's still controllable. Everything went in the target there. And here's our targets. Everything pretty much went in the pie plates. You know, that's me. Not the best shot of the planet, but they did pretty well. They did pretty well. It's a very accurate little gun. I really like this little thing. Fine. It's a heck of a... And I want to compare this for you to the Glock 19 here. And this is why I think this 239 is not very well received, and not a lot of people really look at them when they're looking for a carry gun. As you can see, the two guns are almost identical in length, front to back. The slide comes back a little bit further for the Glock, but the beaver tail, such as it is about almost the same position. You just have this radius here to handle the hammer and all that. But otherwise, so that does give you a little better concealability than this blockiness on the Glock. But you can see it's the same, the gun's basically the same length. So you're not saving a lot there. And the guns are top to bottom, with magazines in there, identical. You see, each one covers up the other one. So what we have is, you can have an 8-round gun that is heavier. I mean, the Glock empty weighs about 2 ounces less than the Sig. This Sig empty is 25 ounces, which is a pretty good chunk. That's because it's a steel slide, of course, but it's an aluminum frame instead of polymer, and so you've got a lot of weight issues there. So let's take, you're looking for a concealment gun. The other problem is, you look at the slide widths, and they're basically identical. I mean, you know, 1/16 of an inch either way, or a couple millimeters one way or the other, something like that. But they're basically the same. Now, the only thing the Sig is improving for you is the grip width. And that was Sig's original intent, was the grip width on the single stack. That's why they went with the single stack, because you can see it is narrower by a certain amount than a double stack Glock. But is it enough to make a difference? Yeah, under a really light shirt or something like that, this gun will not print as much, although you still have as big a chunk width-wise stuffed into your waistband, if you're carrying inside the waistband, as with a double stack. So you can go with this slightly thinner down in the grip, but still overall the same size gun with 8 rounds, or you can get a Glock 19 with 15 rounds. I mean, and there's so many other guns out there that even when this gun came out, yeah, the Glocks were there, but you also had the Smith & Wessons, and you could get a compact 69-16, for instance, that would still have, what, about 10 or 12 rounds in it, and about 12 rounds, I think, and it was about the same size as the Sig. And just real quick, let's pull in the Glock 19's little brother, the Glock 26. And you can see the gun is shorter by close to an inch. There, get that in the frame for you. It's shorter by close to 3/4 of an inch to an inch. It is far shorter in the grip, and of course the slides are going to be the same width, but you've got a much more compact gun. This thing's got 10 rounds in it, so you got 2 extra rounds compared to the Sig with a shorter grip. Now, of course, you have the issue of wrapping your pinky around it and all that, and some people just can't get their heads around that concept. But, so this gun, for just 2 rounds less, gives you more grip, but it's a bigger, heavier gun. And this Glock 26 unloaded is far, far lighter than the Sig. So that's pretty much why you've got the Sig 239. Never got the love that it really deserves. It's a fantastic little gun though, and if you're a single stack fan like I am, if you can appreciate the value that a single action brings to the concealment game, and just the fact that it's an easier gun to hang on to, if you're willing to put up with, you know, sacrifice a little magazine capacity, it's still a really good gun. And I think that's one of the major things that the 239 has going for it. However, for the firepower you have, you're carrying a lot of weight that you don't necessarily need. Like we said, you can get the Glock 19, twice the firepower, in roughly the same package, and roughly when they're all loaded up, yeah, the Glock's going to be a little heavier because it's carrying more ammo, but not by much, and it's essentially the same size gun. So it's kind of, you know, a no-brainer unless you just have to have this thinner grip, in which case there are guns on the market now with even thinner grips, single stack guns. Heck, there's double stacks out there like the Hellcat and stuff. They're about maybe this thick, just a smidge thicker, but thinner than the Glock 19. So again, the 239 just doesn't get enough love because of those things. I mean, most people in the market, they do all the math and they go, I don't need a 239, which is probably why it's not on the market anymore. Well, there you have it, all the ins and outs on the not so famous Sig P239. Great little gun, as you saw, and hopefully you enjoyed the video. We appreciate you taking your valuable time to spend with us here at the LocaCarnivore. And remember, you can always learn at least one thing from everybody you meet. So pay attention. Thanks for watching. Try that again. Well, there you have it. All the ins and outs on the pit.